Father Alexander Rentel is Chancellor of the USCA and has taught canon law at St. Vladimir's Orthodox Seminary for many years. Father Alexander is one of just a handful of Orthodox academics whose focus is on the canonical tradition of the Orthodox Church. I know there's a lot of interest in the canons, in the canonical tradition, and so I was really glad for the opportunity to sit down with Father Alexander recently. So without further ado, I hope you'll enjoy this episode from my interview with Father Alexander Rentel.
One of the regular questions that emerges whenever people talk about the canons, are all canons enforced? Are they all, this is everything in the canonical tradition? And people go and they'll read a collection. They'll read maybe perhaps, out of the Rudder, they come across volume 14 of the Nicene, Nicene Fathers, and they read these canons and they try and make sense of them. And there are some very obscure, very difficult to understand canons. Canons that say women can't have unbraided hair. You can't go to a Jewish doctor. You can't jump over bonfires and some sort of pagan celebration. And people wonder, and they say, is this canon, is this true? And in their minds, it casts doubt on other canons in the tradition that seem to speak about something far greater, deeper with regard to the church. So some of the canons that speak about the relationship with bishops and their metropolitan. I'm thinking of Apostolic Canon 34, Antioch Canon 9, which speaks about a very delicate relationship that a bishop has in his own district, his own area, the relationship that he then has with his brother bishops and then with his metropolitan. So it's almost the sense of, well, if these canons that speak about I can't go to a Jewish doctor, women can't have unbraided hair, jumping over bonfires, does the lack of application of these mean there's an equal lack of application of those? No, I think there's a consistent canonical methodology that can be used that recognizes that some canons perhaps have less force in our own life as than others. But even further, more fundamental to this question is to point out that every canon has to be interpreted. Every canon has to be interpreted because, as I've already said, every canon has been written very much in response to a question that has been posed, either to one bishop, conciliar activity, a father has brought it before a council. So every canon has to be interpreted. And that interpretation requires, any number of things. The sensitivity to the text, you have to know the historical context. If you're reading in translation, you have to recognize that you're reading in translation and not in the original language itself. Further, you have to consider the rationale behind these canons, that you're bringing somebody, as with anything in the church, you're bringing somebody to a renewal of faith in Jesus Christ, salvation in Jesus Christ himself. This kind of underlying rationale behind this. And so you realize and you see that perhaps some canons, while having had great force in their own times, don't have now. But that doesn't negate the other. And as I've said, every canon has to be interpreted along those lines. So one of the most famous canons, especially in the so-called diaspora of the churches, is First Nicaea 8, which concludes discusses how to receive in Cathar clergy. Cathars were an early schismatic group who held a very rigorous position vis-a-vis the Catholic Church. Cathar meaning Puritans, perfectly good translation. And the canon speaks about how to receive them into the church. Even more, it talks about how to receive in Cathar clergy into the church. But even more, it speaks about how to receive in Cathar bishops into the church. And the canon concludes with a very interesting phrase, and it says, so that if the bishop wants to receive in this bishop and allow him to share the honor, so be it. But, if he doesn't, he can make him a cor episcopus. And he says, and the canon ends with, so that there will not be two bishops in one city. Well, we in the so-called diaspora have turned that around a little bit and say one bishop, one city is a canonical rule. So the question emerges, if you can't go to a Jewish doctor, is this canon also then not true of the one bishop, one city? And I would say, of course, no. Because this canon also has to be interpreted. It has to go through any number of levels of interpretation. There are no cathars. We have no co-episcopes. We're not receiving in, clergy like this. We have no empire. We're not predicated on the idea of imperial geography. All of these sorts of things are mentioned in this canon, alluded to, spoken of. And we interpret it when we read it. But a coherent and a consistent canonical methodology will seek to apply it, interpret it, and apply it consistently and coherently with all the others and say, look, what this canon is saying is, in many ways, a lot of things are out of date of this. We have no cathars, no empire, these sorts of things. But the force behind it is true. So then you can go from that sort of perspective and look at other canons. And you say, can't go to a Jewish doctor. Look, I live in New York. Yeah? It's impossible, not to go to a Jewish doctor. One of my doctors is a wonderful man, and I was having problems with a particular issue, and he was the first doctor who gave credence to the idea when I said to him, Doctor, I have to fast. I'm a priest. I, can't eat some days, and I, have to have a very strict fast. And instead of saying, well, if there are medical reasons for you to eat, or, certainly the church doesn't hold that, he immediately said, well, of course, and here's what you need to do. Here's how we can figure this out. So, but if you imagine going to a Jewish doctor in late antiquity, or going to any doctor who was not Christian in late antiquity, was something akin to going to another church or another faith organization, not to a sterile medical park office, the kind that we're used to now, very sanitary conditions, giving you very straightforward science, medical technology, but probably faith practitioners with amulets, superstitions, all sorts of questionable practice related to your faith in Jesus Christ, then of course you can't go. Because somehow that practice would be negating that faith in Jesus Christ, which all of the canons, as I've said, are there to protect and enforce. And I think a consistent and coherent canonical methodology can reflect. These kind of canons have lost their force in a very straightforward manner. But that doesn't mean that necessarily they're applicable, or even that they were wrong when they first came into being. They might just not have as much of an impact in our life now.
Hi again. Hope you enjoyed this episode from my interview with Father Alexander Rentel. Please subscribe to get notified when new videos become available. And if you enjoyed this episode, please consider becoming a patron of this channel. There's a link to the patronage page of our website below this video. Thanks so much for your support, and we'll see you soon.